Hello, my name is Sam Rosenbach, and this is my first vlog about a book, so that's kind of exciting. So I read Misquitoland by David Arnold. Sorry, I had to double check. But I'm gonna have some spoilers in here, so I'm gonna talk about it. I'll tell you when the spoilers are, so you can leave if you want to, because it is a good book, and I highly recommend it. So basically, it's about this girl who is kind of told she has schizophrenia, but she goes on this journey to find her mom. She has two friends come along with her, and it's a beautiful story, just kind of like about self-realization and love and new beginnings. So kind of a cliche book, but I loved it. I definitely would give it probably like a 4.5, 5 out of stars. It's a really good book. I don't read books often. Sorry, Miss Tripp. But this one is definitely one I would probably read again. So now I'm gonna get into some spoilers. Sorry, it's kind of kind of early, but I just really want to get into this book. So basically, I made a whole bunch of notes in here. I know we weren't supposed to, like, annotate, because I'm in an AP Lit class. I know we weren't supposed to annotate, but I was like, okay, I have to make comments. So basically, I related to this a lot, because in this book, her dad is not so much like mine, but in the way that she thinks about him, I definitely understand her. She definitely thinks that he's like this controlling person. He's a good guy, but as she says in the book, he succumbs to the crazy of the world. And so I definitely understand that, and I definitely relate to her. And I feel like that's a huge theme in this book, is kind of succumbing to this crazy world that we live in, and letting it become us instead of kind of becoming our own version of ourselves, which is exactly what she's trying to do in this book, although she is trying to find her mom, who is declared to be sick. So I definitely understood it, and I think the theme of the book is something that everybody should realize. It's that self-realization, that believing in yourself, even though it's cliche. I think reading it through somebody else's eyes, especially in the way that this author, David Arnold, writes it, she's 16 years old, and she's so understanding of the world, and she really just understood me, and that's how I felt about the book. Like, that's why I really liked it so much, because I'm 17 years old, like, I'm going through this crazy thing called life, and I really understood her, because she's going on this journey. So her parents get divorced, and she is living with her dad and her stepmom named Kathy. She hates her stepmom, which is completely understood. She's 16 years old. Her stepmom just kind of came into the picture not so long before she started writing this book, as a narrator. And she is writing, in every chapter there's a letter to her little sister named Isabel, who is actually named after her aunt, who is schizophrenic. So that's kind of where that comes from. Her dad thinks that she's schizophrenic because she's kind of odd, she talks to herself a little bit, but she doesn't, because of what her dad believes in her, she doesn't know what's real and what's fake. So she finds out her mom is sick one day and runs away. She has to go find her mom. Her mom is in Cleveland, Ohio. So she makes her way to the Greyhound bus and finds this lady named Arlene, and also Poncho Man, but I'll get into that in a second. And Arlene is this beautiful human being. She's older. She's a lot older than her name is Mary. Sorry. Her name is Mary, and she goes by Mim because her name is Mary Iris Malone. So she is she's on this bus with Arlene, and Arlene is like this really interesting person with a wooden box. And so Mim is kind of going through this thing where she's like, I don't have many friends, so she makes friends with Arlene, which is completely out of her comfort zone because she doesn't have very many friends, which is, I really loved this part of the book. I really loved Arlene as a character, even though her life lasted long. I mean, her life did not last long. Sorry. Throughout the book, so they get in this accident, and she loses Arlene, and she doesn't really know what to do with herself at this point. Like, she's already going through so much, realizing that her mom is sick, realizing that she is kind of all alone on this trip by herself. And so she meets this other man named Poncho Man. And after the accident, they have to go on another bus, which they get for free because they just got in like a huge accident. But she's really trying to make her way to Ohio. So she meets this guy named Poncho Man who kind of, it's not necessarily said outright, but he definitely tries to rape her. And this part is it's so hard to listen to. Like, I mean, not maybe not listen to, but it's almost like you can hear her because the pain that she goes through and kind of like what she's feeling as a character is so, I don't even know how to explain it because I've never gone through something like this, but it kind of makes you feel for her. Like, you understand that she's this man who's a lot older than her. He's an attorney, or that's so he said, and he tries to rape her in a bathroom. And so she's going through all of these emotions, and then further on in the book, she realizes that somebody else on her bus who, she was this tiny little Hispanic girl with her mom, had gotten raped by him. And so she was really upset about that because she has her objective, which is what she calls it, in mind. And she really just wants to get to Ohio. She doesn't want to spend her time in with police officers. So she just lets it go, and she feels really bad about that because this little girl could speak up and she didn't. And I feel like part of that is her self-realization. Like, she is going through this thing and she doesn't really know how to speak up for herself because she never has been able to with the schizophrenia, her dad, her dad pushing pills on her, changing doctors. She had a doctor named, I kind of interpreted it as Dr. Makundi, but I could be wrong, to this other doctor who doesn't have a grizzly bear. She loved the big bear that was in Dr. Makundi's office, and she just kept talking about that. And I think that's just a huge part of it because she realized that she didn't speak up, and it's because of what she succumbing to the crazy of the world. And so there comes that theme again. But after this Greyhound bus accident and after the Poncho Man accident, they arrive in Independence, which I believe, I don't really remember where it was, but this is where Arlene's nephew lives. And so the wooden box is for her nephew named Ahab. And Ahab is gay. He's dating a really fat man. But before that, I'm so sorry. Before that, she meets this, he's kind of implied to be special needs, because she talks about her old friend Ricky. She meets this guy named Walt, and he's really special to her because he's, kind of like that ignorance is bliss type, like, he's just happy with whatever's happening. She just falls in love with him. And she moves on in her adventure with him after, a couple boys that lived, near him definitely tried to take his money, take advantage of the poor kid, so they ran away together and end up at this gas station where Ahab and his boyfriend work, which is actually really cool because she kind of goes through this thing where she's like, oh yeah, movies aren't real, like, I'm never gonna see this guy, even though I'm trying to find him and give him this wooden box from Arlene, and she just kind of ends up there. And so the crazy boy from the place that Walt lives follows them there and tries to kill them. She calls him a shadow kid because she could see him, like, see his face, see his features, but she couldn't see him as a person. Like, she saw him kind of as, like, a monster, like that shadowy figure. And so I thought that was really interesting, like, her interpretation of what the man was, because she knew he was real because, like, everybody was protecting him, but she just didn't feel like he was a real person. And so that was really interesting. I just really loved that side of her, like, that kind of was interpreting and kind of beginning that realization to figure out, like, what's real, what's not. So after that, she goes to the police station and finds another person from her Greyhound bus. His name at the time was 17C because that's where he was sitting on the bus, and she was in love with him. She's like, oh my god, you're so hot. Which, by the way, she describes him. He's not only attractive to her, but he's witty, he's funny, he's intelligent, he loves Walt the way that she loves Walt. So his name is Beck. And Beck is a really, really important character to her because even though she falls in love with him, he's a lot older than her. And so they kind of go through this thing where they obviously like each other, but they can't really admit it to each other outright because of their age difference. So there's that part. And I love Beck. He's such a great character in this book. The way he takes care of Walt and the way he takes care of her, he buys her car. Well, actually, she buys the car, but since she did not have a license yet, he pretended that he was the one driving the car, which he ended up doing, but he helped her out a lot and actually ended up driving her wherever she wanted to go. So on the way there, Walt is obsessed with the Cubs, and the Cubs suck. Obviously, but Beck and Mim find a game. They're playing the Reds, and so they go to a game. Walt is cheering, he's living, and he loves it. And so Beck and her are kind of watching this and just being like genuinely happy. And this is like the first time that she's felt genuinely happy in her life. So I really like this part, because this is kind of when she realizes that she has these really good friends that love her, that care about her, and even though they've only known each other for a couple days at this point, she loves them, and she begins to realize that she is like genuinely happy, and so she's going on this adventure with them. She ends up going to get a pretzel, because she's like, whatever, I stole my stepmom's money, like, I can go get a pretzel. So she goes to get one, and she has this what she calls, I can't even remember, but it's like this sickness that she has, and so her epiglottis like flutters, is what she says. So whenever she kind of gets nauseous or like gets excited or nervous, she throws up. And she sees these penny loafers on this guy, and he's totally unrelated to the Poncho Man and whatsoever, like completely unrelated. But she kind of has that PTSD feeling where she kind of remembers, like, he's in the bathroom and he's trying to rape her, and she throws up all over this guy's shoes. And I don't know, it adds a little bit of humor, but it's like serious humor, so it's a little bit satirical. So I liked that part as well. And then after this game, they stay in a couple motels, and just kind of, get to know each other a little bit more. Her and Beck kind of, this is when they really start a connection. They really start to realize that they are, they're really similar and different in good ways, and they really just start to like each other, but they can't outright say it. So there's that implication piece again. And after this motel, they get back in the car, and Walt gets really sick, so they take him to an animal hospital, which is, it's kind of funny because Beck had seen it in a Seinfeld episode. So he thought it was like, oh, okay, so he went, and the doctor was like super pretty, she was a vet, super serious, and Walt loved her. And then turns out he just like had some food poisoning or something, and he was fine, so they just drove on. And she realized that that Beck had somewhere kind of else to be. So they go and visit his foster home sister, who Beck had been trying to get in touch with for a really long time. And her name is Claire. She is a horrible human being. Like, everybody hates her throughout this book. I hate her personally because she just kind of forgot about Beck after all he had done for her in the foster home. I'm not going to go into it just because it's a huge, long other story, and I want to keep going because the rest of the story is so good. But Claire's kind of a douchebag, to be honest. Like, Mim hates her, I hate her, Walt doesn't know the difference, but Beck is genuinely hurt by this, and so they kind of help each other, bounce off of each other, and help each other feel better. And so I really like that part of the book as well, because she's also kind of learning how to love somebody else, because she does have a sister coming along, and even though she's been an only child this whole time, and her mom and dad have loved her, Kathy and her dad are gonna have to give love to somebody else. And so I feel like genuinely, like, helping somebody out with their feelings, I feel like that is also part of it, because she's kind of misunderstanding about that kind of stuff, which I get, but I love this part. And so then they realize that they're really close to Ashland, which is where Mim had originally grown up. And so they go to her old house, and they go in there, and she smells the smells, and kind of brings her back to when she was a child there. And it's really meaningful because she has this lipstick, and it's from her mom's vanity. After her mom had left, this was the only thing that she had left, and she calls it her war paint. So she kind of, like, she puts it on, whatever. Walt calls it mosquito paint, so that's where Misquitoland comes from. But she paints it on, like, kind of like, I guess, a mosquito, which is what Walt calls it. And that's what makes her feel strong. And so she goes into this room, and where her mom used to sleep, and her dad, and the only piece of furniture left in the entire house is this little vanity mirror on top of, like, a little thing. Which she goes and she looks at herself, and she's on this adventure, right? This is where she kind of, like, breaks down, because this is the PTSD, the traumatic time of her parents' divorce. Like, this is where she just kind of wanted to be by herself. And so what ends up ruining it is Kathy comes, and Kathy finds her there. Kathy's actually the only person that called her. Her dad had called her a couple times, but Kathy ended up calling her like 67 times. And so even though Kathy's like this little dolly type person, used to work at the Denny's, she's actually a really genuine person. And Mim realizes this after she took her to see her mom, which we realize at the end of the book that her mom wasn't actually sick. She was sick, but in a different way. She had been abusing either pills or alcohol. The specifics were not disclosed to the audience, but she realizes that she had been looking for her mom this whole time, thinking that she was going to die, but actually her mom didn't even really want to see her, because she's going through this time in her life where she needs to be rehabilitated and remade into the person that she used to be. So Mim was really upset at this fact, but kind of learned to move on with it, let Kathy in. She had Walt, she had Beck, she had all these people in her life surrounding her, and even though her mom wasn't there, she realized that her mom needs to get better. And that's what's the most important part. And even though Walt and Beck leave at the very end of the book and she doesn't get to see them again, she kind of thinks that they're not real, which they are. They wrote her a letter, and she just kind of loves them. And she realizes how to love, how to be part of a different family, how to kind of just absorb what's happening rather than react to it in such a negative way. And so this entire book, it's becoming, Mim is becoming a completely different version of herself just through these two different people, the adventures that she has, even the negative parts where the Poncho Man came in, where the guy tried to kill her, the Shadow Kid, and all the other negative things that had happened to her. But she learned to move on. She learned to move past that because she realizes that there is love in the world. And at the very end of the book, which is the most symbolic piece, she throws her schizophrenic pills out of the window. And that is definitely my favorite part, because she realizes that even if she realizes that she's not schizophrenic, and that this is all real, and that life is real, and she's not going to succumb to the madness of the world. And so that's my summary of the book. I love this book so much, Misquitoland. It's definitely one of the best books I've ever read. I definitely suggest it to you guys. I don't know who's watching this or if anybody's watching this, but if you are, please watch it. I mean, please read it. It's so good. David Arnold is such a good author. I've never even heard of him before. My AP Lit teacher just recommended this to me, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So I definitely recommend it to you guys. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Mim is a great character to get along with, as well as Beck and Walt, and even Kathy at times. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Thank you for listening and or watching. I know it's really long, but I have a lot to say about this book, so thank you.